Hello, my name is Robert Layton, and I'll be talking to you today about my Me LLC. So, the title of my limited liability company is Every Ethical Encounter LLC. The mission of my company is to provide answers to ethical dilemmas of all sorts. We want to help people feel good about their decisions, both ethically and morally, and ensure that the choice is well within their desires. I carefully thought of 5 board members who would provide reasonable solutions without being overly one temperament or without being rash. The first board member I identified is Malcolm X, who was an African American and Muslim activist as well as a courageous leader during the civil rights movement in America in the 1950s and 1960s. I wanted to have Malcolm on my board because he will be the guy we turn to when we need someone to provide force and someone who just won't take no for an answer. Malcolm X brings that energy and intuition into our board, as well as that choleric attitude that really demands results and gets things done. The next board member I identified is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, similarly to Malcolm X, was an African American civil rights activist in America in the 50s and 60s. However, he differed from Malcolm X in the sense that his protests and his reforms were more peaceful and nonviolent. Martin Luther King is seen as more phlegmatic and more sanguine, and I think that by having those two on my board, both Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there will be a balance of the two so we're not overly choleric or overly phlegmatic. I think that having those two on my board, there will be a good equilibrium so that the solutions that will be provided, as aforementioned, won't be overly one temperament or the other. The third board member I identified is Aristotle, who is a Greek philosopher and is more often than not touted as being the father of Western philosophy. I wanted him on my board because he himself helps to define ethics and morality. By having the father of ethics and morality on my board, he will help come up with solutions that aren't unethical or immoral. He will bring solutions that, as aforementioned, are ethical and moral and in copious amounts of ways. The next board member I identified is Jeremy Bentham, who was an English philosopher and social reformer who is seen as the founder of utilitarianism. I wanted him on my board specifically because I personally value utilitarianism, or the act of selecting choices and decisions based on which choice or which option will provide the greatest good for the most amount of people on my board. I think that that's one of the most ethical ways to live, and whenever I personally am faced with an ethical dilemma, I try to think about which would benefit the most amount of people. And having him on my board, I can relate to that and adapt to what he has to say. The last board member I identified is my own mother, Jean Layton, who is a paraprofessional at Williamson High School. She brings patience to the board to not act rash and to think each decision and option through thoroughly without acting rationally or without thinking all the possible solutions. She also brings energy, wisdom, as well as a voice of reason. She has that motherly instinct which is priceless, and she also won't allow me to act unethical. So after I identified my board, I began to think about someone whose LLC board I would want to work on because I think that my temperament would be valuable to them and help. And the person I identified is NBA star and Cleveland Cavaliers player LeBron James. Now, for those who don't know, LeBron James is arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. Now, with being the greatest basketball player of all time, he's constantly being followed by the media and journalists and reporters, and they're all always waiting for him to slip up so that they can make the headlines and so that they can kick off their own journalism career. However, this has yet to happen. LeBron has yet to succumb to the pressure of being followed, all while being consistently one of the best basketball players. We have seen LeBron develop schools in impoverished areas, as well as just be a very charitable person and someone who's very philanthropic. We often see celebrities, athletes, and millionaires alike who either act criminally or are just kind of ignorant to the everyday life of those who aren't amongst them. However, LeBron has yet to do this, and as aforementioned, is extremely philanthropic and extremely ethical, all while, as aforementioned, being in the spotlight almost 24/7. So, I wanted to take it further by identifying two challenges I think I'll face in my life and about how the input from all of my board members will help me get through these challenges. The first challenge I identified is getting promoted at work. So, after I graduate, I'll be working as an analyst at a company where, as with everyone else, I aim to grow, to get promoted, and to be as successful within the company as possible. However, there are times when I doubt my intuition and I doubt my leadership qualities, but I really think that my board members would help kind of share their experiences and help guide me in the right direction. Having leadership characters or having leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King on my board, I can follow their work ethic, their perseverance, and their ability to have their backs against the wall and continue to persevere. The next challenge I identified is developing a solid work-life balance. With having Aristotle on my board, a figure who identified the importance of having a balance of work and leisure, I can take after him and mimic him. I also have my mother on the board who, again, instilled the belief in me that having a work-life balance is just as important as being successful. I sometimes find myself overly infatuated with my work, my papers, and any deliverable that I deliver. I won't let myself hand anything in unless I think it's perfect, and sometimes that means in friends relationships with friends, family, because I'm spending too much time focusing on this and not them. However, with the likes of Aristotle, Jeremy Bentham, and my mother, they will help me develop that work-life balance because they themselves have identified the importance of work and leisure, and I can take after them. Overall, my board is very balanced. We don't see anybody who's overly choleric, who's overly melancholic, sanguine, or phlegmatic, but we see a good mix of all of them. So without having one temperament, I get ideologies from all the temperaments and can really identify what I think is best. I think my board sets me up for success and will really help pave an ethical path for me to follow and still allow me to be successful. There are people who are very successful today who haven't had the opportunity to be ethical. A lot of times we see successful people who had to cheat to get their way up there or act in ways that are immoral just to be as successful. But with the board members I have, I don't think that that would happen because they have been successful all while being very ethical people. I'm very excited to work with these members and to grow and to have them develop me into the best ethical person I could be. Thank you, and that is my ethical company.